Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Life in Between on True Chat. I'm excited to be with all you guys today. As always, I'm broadcasting from Urbana, Ohio this time instead of Cincinnati, and I'm back here at the home studio, so that's the lovely background that you get behind me. We got the True Chat sign going on right there, and we got this nice tree and this weird light thing over here, so ignore the fact that I don't know how to do professional lighting apparently. But no, I'm just kidding, I actually do, which is why you can see my face and that's not causing big issues, but I just kind of realized this is a little distracting, so just don't worry about it. And without further ado, we're not going to spend more time on me yakking about all this stuff that you guys don't care about. What we are talking about on today's episode of Life in Between is Bret and I moving in, which is the broader topic of moving in with a significant other. I think this is an interesting one to cover because it isn't just about, orientation. It's not just an LGBT issue. This is something that I think a lot of young people face of when are you ready to move in with a significant other or another person? When are you ready to move out from your parents? So I'm excited to talk about all this today. But before we continue on, I did want to let you know we are doing a new show format where the opening is not going to happen until about the 8-minute mark. And we're looking at that right now to see if that helps you guys when you're looking at the show and whether or not you like it as part of what we're going on. I've got my laptop today to help me reference all the stuff that I want to talk about so that I don't forget anything, because I think there's a lot to go over and a limited amount of time to do it. I'm also trying to keep my videos shorter, so we're going to only probably make it to about 15 minutes on this video or 20 minutes instead of getting up around that half hour mark. And since I don't have anybody else on, hopefully I can actually move through this one pretty quickly. I do apologize, I haven't been able to do videos for like the past 2 weeks. I was sick last week when I didn't get to it. The week before that, Cam and I were coming back from tour. So it's been very hectic, but I'm gonna try to stay more consistent now. So let me know if you like today's video and if you want more videos. Also give me questions. I've heard from some of you on Facebook and it's always fantastic to hear feedback. So I'm excited, and let's get started. So moving in with somebody that is a significant other is what we're gonna start with. And when are you ready to move out from your parents' house? I've always been a firm believer that this comes at different stages of life for everybody. So when you're ready is when you know you're ready. Well, how do you know you're ready, Justin? I think you know you're ready if, one, you're financially stable. And that could mean a couple different things. That could mean you have your parents' support to do it and they're helping you financially so that you know you're secure. The only reason I don't like that is if you and your parents get into a fight and they decide to pull back financial support and you don't have a way to supplement that income, then you're just kind of SOL here. Because you've got this lease that might be in your name, you're relying on their income, which maybe is how you got the lease. They pull out their income, now you're stuck and you don't have a way to pay it. So you need to make sure you're financially secure in terms of having a job. I think also being very comfortable with the person you're moving in with is obviously critical. If you've lived on your own previously, then you've got some of that down. Moving in with somebody else, there's a whole lot of things that go into that. You obviously need to like the person, like I said. The next thing I think that's critical is you need to have an understanding and you need to know what they like, what they don't like, how they spend their time, how they don't spend their time. So if you've only been dating for a month, for example, a lot of people would say that's not enough time. But did you spend every waking hour with them? Have you had plenty of times, plenty of nights where you've spent the night? Because if you have, you may have a good idea of how you live with them. If you've had a relationship for 8 months and you've never spent the night and you've never stayed with them for an entire day, then you're probably not ready to move in either. So my point is here, it goes both ways. Everybody looks at this and says it's a matter of time. You must be with somebody long enough before you can move in. I think that's part of it, but I don't think that's the whole situation. So you do need to look at, obviously, how well do you know this person? Are you confident that you know them and that you're not going to get annoyed with them? Because again, you sign this lease and you find out 2 or 3 months down the road that they leave stuff the way you don't like, or they're messy, or they chew too loud, or they don't buy food that you like, or they're irresponsible with finances, and you run into all these problems. And this is true, I think, this is just a situation of, regardless if it's a roommate or significant other, the important thing with the significant other, and I stumbled over my word there before, I don't know what happened, it sounded like I had a mini stroke, but I didn't, I'm okay. The thing with the significant other is obviously you want to make sure that what you're doing The thing with the significant other is obviously you want to make sure you know what you're doing and that you understand that you've got some groundwork laid with this person and that you're really in love with them. This is one of those areas where unfortunately there's not just a lot of factual stuff that I can pin to it and say you'll know whether or not you're in love with them. I think you will, but I don't think there's this set of criteria that lays it out. I do and always have been a firm believer that your relationship should do several things for you. And if your relationship isn't meeting one of these things, then I think it's important to evaluate the relationship and decide if it's the right move if you're not getting everything that you should be getting from a significant other. And it's give and take. They ought to be getting these things from you as well. You ought to be getting support. They ought to be supportive of everything you're doing in your life, and they ought to be on board with helping you in ways that they can. Which leads into the next point of they need to make you a better person. I've heard a lot of people out there who have marriages where they are independent people. You know, I would be okay without the other one. I don't look at that as what a relationship is. I think a relationship should make you a stronger, better person. That person should push you, encourage you to keep going. Bret, for example, was a big part of the reason that I ended up getting to do my tour for True Chat. He was very persistent with, when I had doubts, reassuring me. Telling me that he would be there to support me in any way that he could, that he would do what he could to make sure that I stayed motivated. And that was a big reason that I ended up actually going on tours, because he helped me stay motivated. I knew it was the right choice, but I needed that extra support. Now, you might be able to get that from friends, but there comes a time where having somebody that you trust with everything, which leads to the next point about what you should be able to do with your significant other, you have to trust them with everything, because that adds a new level of understanding to a relationship. It adds a new level of comfortableness. I don't think that's a word. It adds a new level of being comfortable with somebody, that you can trust them with these things so that you're not hiding things from them, and ultimately they can help you move on, they can help you do things, they can help you be successful. And I think that in a good relationship, if you found the right person, or at least in Bret and I's case, and I think we found the right person, is that we play off one another's strengths and weaknesses. Everybody has their faults, right? Nobody's perfect, and if you think you're perfect, I'm sorry, but you're not. I'm not perfect, you're not perfect, no one's perfect. We all have our faults, and that's where if you can find somebody in a relationship that's better at certain things than you are and increases, your ability to get better at your weaknesses, that's a way they can help you. For example, while I'm great at social situations, I won't say great, but I'm very good at it because it's part of my job, I don't enjoy it. Bret makes sure that I get out and see people. On the flip side, Bret likes to be very lazy. That said, he wants to work out and he wants to do stuff like that. I help him get motivated to do that. I sometimes come off very passionate, very strong. I sometimes am a little stubborn. I think Bret can be too, but the difference here is that with other people I can be stubborn. With strangers I can be very steadfast. And that's something I've always fought on True Chat, is trying to listen to other people's sides. But usually I'm not good at changing my own opinion. Bret, on the other hand, sometimes gets pushed around. This is something that drives me absolutely insane. I don't like it. I feel bad for him. I don't want it to happen. So I help him learn how to stand up for himself. I make sure that people aren't pushing him around. These are just examples, obviously there's even more of them, where we play off one another's strengths and weaknesses. And I think that that's what part of a good relationship is. So we're going to circle back around here to what exactly, when exactly you're ready to move in with somebody. And I'm going to tell you what my reasoning was. And before we get to that, though, I do want to take a quick break, and following the new show format, go to the Life in Between opening. So we'll be right back. Welcome back. Before we continue, if you haven't already, you should make sure to download True Chat's mobile app. Just search True Chat, all as one word, and download the app to start listening on demand to the best of radio. It is absolutely free forever. True Chat's TRUECHAT. So for those of you that can't spell, that is how you do it. And I'm kidding, of course, but there's a lot of people out there who think it's TRUCHAT, and it's actually just like it should be, Truechat. So now that we've cleared that up, we will continue on with our show. And I did just want to highlight part of True Chat's mission. I'm not going to read the whole thing because we read it on every show, and there's plenty of opportunity for you to hear it. But we wanted to be the mortal enemy of speculation, innuendo, and stagnation. And that lends itself to promoting understanding, which is obviously what this show's about. I didn't start out in the intro about talking about the theme for today's show. And as I told you guys, I was planning to kind of spend the first season of Life in Between on the necessity to hide, why people feel the need to hide. And this show is going to relate to that theme, and I'm going to make sure to share that at the end. So I didn't want to leave that out or miss that opportunity to share that with you guys. So moving on here of when are you ready to move in with somebody? And I think this is another one of those gut feeling things. The factual stuff you can put toward it though, and I've got several points here again that I want to make sure that I get in. The factual points you can put toward it though are if you have talked with your partner and you're both committed to this is a relationship that I think is going to lead to something more. Now that's different for everybody. Something more could mean marriage, which is probably what most of you are assuming. It could mean a lifetime partnership. As we know, there's been a large spike in millennials who choose to never get married, but cohabitate, live together, and be in a committed relationship. So those factors are obviously things you need to consider. In Bret and I's case, it's serious enough that we feel we're ready to take the next step. We want to live with each other before we get to the most serious step, the final commitment of a relationship like marriage, because we want to make sure that everything about our relationship is strong prior to that. There's a lot of people out there that may say you shouldn't move in before you get married. And the reason that I think that that's not a false line of thinking, because there is merit to it, is that ultimately you don't want to have to make huge sacrifices on an ongoing basis for your partner. You should be able to make little sacrifices here and there, and you may have big sacrifices sometime, but there's no sense in going into a relationship lifelong if you know that you've got issues with things they do. And if they can't change them, you should know that before you get married. At least that's, again, that's what I believe, or before you make that next commitment. And part of the way to do that is to move in and live with each other for a while, 6 months, a year, what have you, before you take that next step. And that's why I really think that it's crucial that people take the opportunity to talk about that. Communication is a huge thing, and you could say it's a theme amongst most of the other shows I've done, where you need to communicate with your partner. You need to talk to them about these things. The reason that Bret and I have worked for so well, the reason we've been together 9 months, the reason that we've actually never had a single fight. We've had more than a few disagreements, we've had more than a few big discussions, but we've never actually fought. We have never yelled at one another. And that was something that we set as kind of a ground rule at the beginning, is that we would never yell at one another. The never go to bed angry thing I don't think is realistic, because I don't think you can force yourself to not be angry. But to always sleep in the same bed, once we've moved in together, to always sleep in the same bed was something that we felt was an important commitment. And that's because it shows that we're never mad enough at each other, never yell, always sleep in the same bed. Those are little ceremonial type things almost, or traditional type things, or ground rules, whatever you want to call them, that we set out because we feel they are things that ultimately ensure we will never get so mad at one another that we get blind by anger and don't actually listen to what the other one's saying. Again, one of the reasons we really work is because we communicate. I can tell him anything and he can tell me anything, and we don't freak out about it. We don't worry about it. No, I don't think that came natural at the beginning of the relationship, but it happened with Bret a lot sooner, and that's because part of our relationship was founded on him coming to me in a time where I really needed somebody else. I was still having difficulty with my recovering from my last relationship, and aside from that, I was still having issues with panic attacks at the time, which I've shared with you guys a little bit briefly. And I do want to know if you want me to do a show on those and explain more about them. I've had several questions from you guys on Facebook where you reached out to me via messages and you had interest in more details about my previous relationship, what the motivation was, the consequences of it. So if you're still interested in that stuff, let me know, and I'll definitely make sure to do a video on that coming up. But back to what I was talking about is, I think that the fact that we can share these things so openly is partly because of how our relationship came to be. We were both coming out of previous relationships that were fairly long-term and fairly bad. And that laid us some groundwork to start with of things we knew that we wanted to be different from the last relationship. That we both have a voice, it's equal, we're partners. One of us is not following the other one. Now, one of us may have larger ambitions than the other in different areas, and some of us may have ambitions to, do different things, but that doesn't mean that we can't work together to accomplish each other's goals. And obviously, we're in an interesting situation right now with, moving in together, and this comes into the family aspect of it. Bret and I were confident that we're ready emotionally to move in together and that we can figure it out financially. Bret's still in school, but I work basically full-time, and obviously I have True Chat, which I do with you guys like 60 hours a week, so I would say definitely full-time, and I can support it financially. His parents raise a valid concern. What if something happens between us? That's what parents are supposed to do, guys, and I want everybody who's listening to understand, who's looking at this and concerned about what their parents will say or have had parents that have done this, appreciate that your parents probably love you enough if they're raising that concern. They don't want you to be in a situation, where you get not only hurt mentally, but also get into legal issues because you were financially dependent on somebody else, and now, you're out of luck. They're gone. You're hurt emotionally. You don't have a job. You can't pay the rent, and you're in a bad situation. That's where trusting your partner really comes into play. Your parents are not going to be able to, they're not going to be able to know whether or not you're ready with your partner to do that because they're obviously not in the relationship. What they're going to do is be good parents, and they're going to voice their concern. They're going to share with you, what you should be thinking about, whether or not you're prepared. And chances are, you're going to have parents that vary in spectrum all over the frequency in terms of they're going to be the ones that yell and scream and call you stupid and threaten to take away all support. There's going to be the others that try to calmly explain stuff and lay it out for you and threaten to take financial support away. And then there's going to be the parents that are just like hunky-dory and, okay, that's fantastic. Do what you want and we'll support you, I guess, if we can. And if we can't financially, then we can't. And it's up to you. And there's, like you said, there's a whole spectrum of them. And I think that depends on where you're at in your relationship with your parents. You have to keep in mind, Bret and I aren't, we're not in our 30s. So our parents still look at us as fairly young adults, which we are. We're still around that college age and we're making big life decisions. These decisions are obviously something that, you want to be aware of, that those are decisions you're making. And you have to be prepared for people to object, because when you're young, a lot of people look at it that way and say, you got to be careful. You got to make sure that, you're making good decisions here. And I have said, so many times. I was listening back to shows this week, and you would be amazed at the amount of times I say that. So I want you guys to give a thumbs up to this video every time I say, If you catch me saying it more than I would say 5 times, write it in the comments and get on me so that I quit doing this. It annoys me. I don't know if it annoys you, but I catch it and it's crazy. So please stop me from doing it. I really want to wrap up this show to keep it on time with what I said I was shooting for with you guys. So really, I think the biggest point is be prepared to communicate. Communicate with your partner, communicate with parents, and find a way that it works. A lot of times I think the part of the reason that all this discrepancy happens with parents is there's multiple things happening. One, you're maturing, what country am I from? Maturing into a full-fledged adult. So there's a lot of changes for you to adapt to. There's the changes of you making decisions, you financially making decisions, what all that means for you and how you're going to handle it in your life, what approach you're going to take. On the flip side, your parents are adjusting to the fact that they don't really control you anymore, and that they have to start treating you like an adult, and that they may have to be behind decisions, or they may have to accept decisions that they wouldn't have made themselves or that they don't support. And I think that's where everybody needs to understand there's so many different changes going on here that communicating with one another, staying calm, respecting choices, those are all huge, because that's how you're going to avoid getting into a big fight with your family, which obviously you don't want to do. So that would be my advice there. And remember, I'm not an expert. This is my observations. This is stuff that I've learned. This is stuff that I've been picking up in the past couple weeks as Bret and I, work on moving in together. It's a process. It's an ongoing type of thing. Sometimes it doesn't happen overnight. Sometimes you start spending part of the week there and part of the week someplace else. There's a lot of different ways to do it. So just don't necessarily have to go slow, but go slow enough that you allow yourself adequate time to think about it. Bret and I have been talking about it for several months before we actually executed it. So we were trying to think through the necessary things. Taking time to make sure you're fully prepared is all you can do. You can't be fully prepared because there's so many things that you're not going to know if you've never lived with somebody before, if you've never lived with a significant other. There's going to be so many things you have to learn, and it's different for everybody. But ultimately, you can do everything you can to be prepared ahead of time. Lay out some ground rules like Bret and I have for how to deal with disagreements, and talk about issues when they arise if you don't like what somebody's doing. Bret and I aren't afraid to usually tell one another if we don't like something the other one's doing. And usually we can have a good talk about it, resolve it, and move on. And then it never becomes a big fight. Don't wait. Don't hold on to things inside of yourself and not tell your partner, because that's how you're ultimately going to get hurt. And I don't want that for anybody. I went through a serious relationship where I was very hurt. It led to a lot of issues for me. And it was mainly a lack of communication that caused that entire thing to fall apart. So communicate. And the necessity to hide, because that was the last thing that I wanted to touch on. The necessity to hide is the fear of how your parents will react if you're in this situation, or the fear of how your partner will react. If you're thinking about moving in with your partner, and you have been for a while, bring it up to them. And bring it up to them in an appropriate setting. Don't blurt it out at one point, in the middle of a TV show or something. And don't bring it up in the middle of, a date where you're out on the town. And there I was saying, geez, I tell you what, guys, I cannot speak today. I'm not even going to edit it out because you guys will probably just laugh and be like, oh, look at him. He can't talk. It's because I already did a show today. I tried to do this right after. A lot of stuff going on. I've been talking all day, and now my mouth's just like it can't handle anymore. So I'm wrapping up. Necessity to hide. It comes through with everybody, whether you're, gay, straight, anything, transgender, what have you. It comes through for all of us. There's always a time where we feel like we have to hide. And I think the biggest thing is stand up for yourself by communicating in a nice way. It doesn't have to be mean. It doesn't have to be, aggressive. It can be just very calm, very clear and concise. Know what you're going to say and say it. And ask for somebody's input. Lots of I language, not lots of you language. What I mean by that, if I was going to say, you really shouldn't, and I'm talking to Bret, you really shouldn't leave your pants on floor, in a heap on the floor because I step on them and I almost tripped. What I say is, I feel like I'm going to be clumsy and fall over your jeans at night because you leave them in the middle of the floor. So if you could keep them out of the middle of the floor, I would appreciate it. What I did there is I used I led off with I, and I said I multiple times more than you. The reason for that is you is an accusational statement. It immediately implies that I am making a statement about you instead of making a statement about me. It needs to be I feel, I observe, I see. That way you're not immediately starting off with putting somebody on the defensive. So that's my last piece of advice for you. And I did want to remind you, if you haven't already, to take an opportunity to download TrueChat's mobile app where you can listen to this show and other shows, as well as our videos. Subscribe on YouTube, like us on Facebook, Twitter, SoundCloud, Tumblr, any of our social medias, which are also connected to our app. For Life in Between on TrueChat, broadcasting from Urbana, Ohio on March 16th, 2016. I'm Justin Weller. As always, thank you very much for tuning in. I'll see you next time. I'm shooting to do a video again this week, so you're getting two, so I can catch up. Be the change, ladies and gentlemen.